Question 10. Carl Benz is often credited with being the inventor of the car. Are you glad the car was invented, or do you think it would be better if the car had never been invented? Give reasons for your opinion and write persuasively. So it's always worth spending a couple of minutes doing a quick plan. A plan will help you to organise your ideas and it will help you to stay on track. So the first thing we need is an introduction, and in your introduction you should state clearly whether you are glad or you are not glad that the car was invented. So I'm going to say it would be better if it had never been invented. And obviously it's absolutely fine if you decide that you're going to write about being glad the car was invented, as long as you can come up with some good reasons. Now, I suggest that you come up with 3 good reasons to support your opinion. And you should have a separate paragraph for each opinion and use connectives. So I would start my first paragraph after the introduction with firstly. So my first reason will be that they're dangerous, that cars kill people. And then my second reason is going to be the fact that they pollute the atmosphere. They contribute to global warming. And I can use the connective secondly or furthermore. And then I'm just going to give one more reason. 3 is plenty. And my third reason is going to be that the car is responsible for destroying communities because people travel around by car rather than walking, and so they don't bump into their neighbours. They don't make friends within their community. And then at the very end, I'll just have a brief conclusion. So it's just a very short plan, but it will help me stay on track, and it's helped me to structure my answer because I've reminded myself that I need an introduction which states my opinion, and I'm going to need to use paragraphs. I'm going to start the paragraphs with connectives like firstly, secondly, and lastly. I've got my 3 reasons. And I've reminded myself to have a brief conclusion. Now I need to write persuasively. So also remember what you need to do to write persuasively. So to be persuasive, you can use rhetorical questions. They are persuasive. They engage the reader. If you say something like, "You do agree with me, don't you?" then that makes it hard for the reader to disagree. And emotive language can be persuasive. If you use emotive language, then you can really appeal to the reader and make it hard for the reader to disagree with what you are saying. It can also be helpful to include facts. If you have relevant facts, then this can be persuasive because people can't argue with facts. Don't feel that you have to give your honest opinion. If you are glad the car was invented but can't think of good reasons why, and you can think of good reasons to use to argue that it would be better if the car had never been invented, then you can write as though it is your opinion that it would be better if the car had never been invented. Choose whichever one you think you are going to be able to write most persuasively about. And don't forget to keep looking back at your brief essay plan. That will make you stay on track. Don't spend a couple of minutes doing it and then ignore it. Once you've got something similar to this down, then if you keep referring back to it, you can't go too far wrong. Now we're going to have a look at the example response. So we start with a very clear introduction in which my opinion is stated very clearly. There is no doubt in my mind that we would all be better off if cars had not been invented. So state your opinion clearly and firmly. This is much more persuasive than if you don't state it clearly. If you sound a bit doubtful, that's not persuasive. And then we have the connective firstly, and we start a new paragraph. It's important to have a paragraph for each reason. This makes it much easier to follow and gives it a really strong structure. So firstly, they are killers. Did you know that hundreds of people are killed every year in the United Kingdom by cars? So I'm using persuasive techniques here. I'm using emotive language by using the word killers. And I'm also using a rhetorical question. Did you know that hundreds of people are killed every year in the United Kingdom by cars? So I'm really drawing attention to the fact that cars can be terrible things. This is completely unacceptable, and I'm sure that everyone who knew and loved those people would seize the opportunity to go back in time and make sure the car was never invented. We wouldn't accept a human murderer walking around, so why do we accept these metal murderers thundering up and down our roads? So I'm being really emotive here, drawing your attention to the people that have loved those people killed by cars. It would be hard not to be upset when thinking about those poor people, and it would be hard not to agree with me that maybe cars are not a good thing. And again, I use a rhetorical question. I'm asking you why we accept this situation. We wouldn't accept a human murderer walking around, so why do we accept these cars? And that's quite thought-provoking, isn't it? And use other techniques when possible as well that are effective. So, for example, I use alliteration with metal murderers, really drawing attention to those words. And also a metaphor referring to cars as murderers. That's effective. It's quite powerful, isn't it, to suggest that cars are murderers. Then we move on to the second reason. So we have secondly, so a connective that links the two paragraphs well. So cars pollute the atmosphere and are big contributors to global warming. They billow out green gas emissions at an alarming rate. If they had never been invented, just think how much less toxic our planet would be. Wouldn't you be happier if you knew the air you were breathing in was cleaner? So this is a rhetorical question that's really hard to argue with. Wouldn't you be happier if you knew the air you were breathing in was cleaner? Well, nobody's going to say no to that, are they? So again, it really makes you think. And look at the choice of words. Billow, so a powerful word. I'm suggesting that cars just don't emit a little bit of greenhouse gas. They emit tons of the stuff. It billows out. And look at this use of the word alarming. So I'm really being emotive here, which makes the whole thing persuasive. And then moving on to the third reason. So lastly, so again, a connective to link the paragraphs well. I think the car is responsible for destroying communities. There was a time when everyone knew their neighbours and had a strong sense of community. Nowadays, because of the car, people do not care about their communities. People jump in their cars and work a long way from home, and children get taken to school by car. It's really sad, don't you think? Being in cars means we do not interact with our neighbours or make many friends in our community. If the car had never been invented, then we would be working locally, going to school locally, and creating a strong sense of community. So this is a really powerful argument, isn't it? I'm trying to paint this picture that if there were no cars, everybody would get to know each other and communities would be much better places, much friendlier, nicer places to live. So the key things here, the things that are going to get you a good mark, are a good structure, so making sure that you have separate paragraphs and separate paragraphs for each reason. So use paragraphs. Make sure you have an introduction that states your opinion clearly. Use connectives. That just makes your workflow and gives it a good structure. Use persuasive techniques, which we've talked about, haven't we? So the rhetorical questions, the emotive language, and use other techniques where appropriate as well, other language techniques. So like I use the alliteration with metal murderers, and it's also a metaphor, murderers. Obviously cars aren't really murderers, but it's effective to suggest that they are. And what else have we got? So at the end, we have a conclusion. I am sure that you now completely agree with me. It was a bad day for humanity when the car was invented. So a brief conclusion will end your work nicely. On these longer style answers, a conclusion is a good idea. Obviously, if you've got a few minutes left, then that's fantastic for you to check through your work, check your spellings and check your grammar. But the best way to improve your spelling and grammar is by reading a lot. There's no better way to improve spelling and grammar than doing that.